At exactly 5:15 p.m., I walked into Gavin Wren's office with a printed report in one hand and 12 years of restraint in the other. I had rehearsed my words for days, revised every line to be firm but fair. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to be heard. "My name is Isolde Marin," I began, as if he didn't know. "Senior Director of Global Accounts. I've been here for over a decade. I've managed more international contracts than any team combined. I've flown over 600,000 miles for this company, most of it coach, and I've never missed a quarterly benchmark." Still nothing. "I haven't had a salary adjustment in 3 years. I'd like to formally request one." Gavin finally looked up. 37, sleek, sharp suit, jawline like a logo. Our new COO, 6 months into the role, already treating the company like his tech startup sandbox. He leaned back, smiled like he'd already heard the ending of my story. "Isolde, do you know how old you are?" I stared at him. "You're competent," he said with a shrug. "But you're from another era. We're not looking backward. We're scaling, evolving." He said the word like it was a religion. He believed in disruption, youth, and short-form wins. I believed in compliance, long-term vision, and earning trust one meeting at a time. We were not the same species. "I've delivered every major international contract since 2014, I said, still calm. "Including Helvetique." Gavin opened a drawer, pulled out a white envelope, and slid it toward me like a receipt. My name, typed. Termination, dated yesterday. "You were going to fire me regardless," I said quietly. He nodded. "Better optics than letting you walk out whining about pay." My hand stayed still, but something inside me curled tight and sharp. I stood. 12 years, I said, more to myself than to him. And not even a conversation. He said nothing. I walked out. No panic, no tears. But Gavin didn't know what I had built behind the curtain. I wasn't just managing contracts. I was the architecture itself. I stepped into the elevator, still holding the envelope Gavin had handed me like a parking ticket. No one else was inside, just me and my reflection, under fluorescent lighting. I looked older than I felt, but sharper than they thought. The woman staring back had seen empires rise on PowerPoint slides and collapse over single miscalculations. I had always known how to read people. I just hadn't expected to misread loyalty. As the elevator descended, my mind climbed back, 4 years ago, spring of 2021. Virelion had been bleeding, a bad expansion into Latin America, a botched software migration, and a public HR scandal had sent our stock into a free fall. We were down 37% in 10 trading days. Layoffs, restructuring, panic meetings every Monday. And then came the offer. Halvex Partners. I still remember the leather folder, the handwritten note, the name at the bottom, Caden Locke, head of global strategy. I met him over coffee in a quiet, no-name cafe in Midtown. He came without a pitch deck. "I've followed your work," he said, folding his hands. "Especially what you did with the Gavatech compliance rebuild. You're precise, discreet, and you know when to escalate and when to outweight the storm." I remember feeling seen in a way I hadn't in years. They wanted me to head their new global compliance initiative. Full control, double salary, fresh team, my own terms. And still, I said no. Because back at Virelion, I had a team in panic, a server on the verge of collapse, and a belief, naive, maybe, that loyalty still meant something. 2 weeks after that meeting, our cloud infrastructure nearly failed. Virelion's vendor suspended services for non-payment. It was a Friday at 4:43 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was still in the office alone when the alerts came in. Red banners flashing across the admin panel. I didn't ask for approval. I just entered my personal credit card, $7,400, enough to keep us live for 30 more days. I never told anyone. That system? It became the foundation of the platform Gavin used to push the Helvetic deal. And now I was standing here, fired in under 2 minutes, not even worth a conversation, by a man who had no idea what I had once sacrificed to keep his lights on. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. I didn't move. My phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: Meeting request. Halvex. Global Compliance Review. From caden.lock@halvexglobal.com. I opened it. Isolde, I've heard some troubling news. I always remembered the grace with which you turned us down. We should talk. Caden. I stood still for a long moment. Not smiling, not crying, just breathing. Caden's face flashed through my memory. Confident, calm, respectful. He hadn't tried to sell me. He'd tried to invite me into something he believed I deserved, and I'd turned it down, because I thought Verelion needed me more. Maybe they had, but they certainly hadn't valued me more. The guilt hit first, the kind that seeps in slowly, like a bruise forming under the skin. Then came the ache, not for the money or the title, but for how easily I'd been erased from something I helped build. I unlocked my car and sat behind the wheel. Engine off, fingers frozen around my phone. There was a time when I believed good work spoke for itself, but today proved that sometimes. Silence only makes it easier for them to ignore you. I hit reply. Not to ask for a job, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, to remind the world that I still existed, that I still had more to say, and that I wasn't done. Not even close. I didn't reply to Caden's email that night. I just stared at it, then closed the laptop and let the room return to silence. In the dim light of my living room, I asked myself a question I never thought I'd have to. When did this place stop feeling like mine? It wasn't just the envelope. It wasn't even the words. It was everything that had been building, slowly, quietly, since Gavin Wren walked through the doors and brought his new vision with him. He arrived in a blaze of buzzwords: velocity, disruption, rebrand, 37, polished, and proud of it. He believed in speed over structure, aesthetics over process. He once said in a leadership meeting, "No one reads memos anymore. Give me dashboards, not documents." The day he was announced as COO, the company sent out a video montage with fast cuts and synth music. I wasn't in it. 12 years. And I didn't make the highlight reel. The first big shift came with his reorg chart. People like me, operations veterans, legal analysts, compliance leads, were pushed sideways, away from decision-making roles. In our place, strategists with visual storytelling skills, culture architects, and an army of 20-somethings with ring lights in their cubicles. I remember the first meeting Gavin ran. I had submitted a detailed risk projection for a cross-border clause. He didn't call on me. He skipped straight to the intern, who had made a flowchart with animated emojis. The next few months became a slow erosion of presence. Slack channels no longer tagged me in deal discussions. My name stopped appearing on invite lists to internal briefings. Even when I spoke, people looked at me like I was narrating a black and white film in a room full of TikToks. And then came the moment that quietly broke something in me. It was a Thursday morning. Gavin sent out an email to the team. Subject: New role. Please welcome Talia. Please join me in welcoming Talia Rowe, who will be shadowing Isolde and supporting global coordination. She'll take the lead on updates moving forward. Talia. She was the summer intern I had personally mentored the year before. Bright, sincere, eager. I'd even written her a glowing recommendation letter for graduate school. Now she was sitting across from me in the same glass-walled conference room where I had once negotiated 10 country compliance frameworks. Her laptop was open. Her eyes were kind. And her voice was low. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't know they'd phrase it like that." I nodded. What else was there to say? I wasn't angry at her. She didn't ask for this. She was just following instructions in a world that now saw me as background. That afternoon, I walked past the glass corridor where the Helvetic banner was being installed in the main lobby. My work, white-labeled, untethered from the woman who had made it real. It was in that moment I realized something brutal. They didn't have to fire me. They'd already replaced me. Just like that. Quietly, politely, completely. Back at home, I reopened Caden's email. "I've heard some troubling news," it read. "I never forgot your answer. We should talk." I hovered over the reply button. For the first time in months, I felt like someone still saw me, not as legacy, not as overhead, as value. I didn't click send, not yet, but I left the tab open, and I let that be a start. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. No alarm. Just that tightening in the chest that happens when your instincts know something your mind hasn't caught up with yet. I didn't go into the office. I logged in from home, like I had countless times before. Muscle memory kicked in. Two-factor authentication, secure token, compliance dashboard. My access hadn't been revoked yet, and maybe that was what unsettled me most. I didn't expect to find anything. Maybe a final glance at the Helvetic contract, just to see how far along they were. Old habits die hard. But I found something I wasn't meant to see. On the latest draft of the agreement, a new clause had been added, one that listed 5 new Helvetic subsidiaries as operating entities. I hovered over the file. No due diligence documentation, no flags, no commentary from legal. I knew those names. 2 of the subsidiaries had been blacklisted by European regulators last year for shell activity. Another one had been inactive for over 6 months. And yet, here they were, folded neatly into a $1.6 billion deal, without a single compliance check attached. I froze. Then, just like I had always done, I flagged them, added notes, cross-referenced public registries, highlighted the risk. Then I forwarded my review to legal, and to Gavin. His response came 10 minutes later. No greeting, just this: "We're in final stages. If we start unraveling things now, we risk delaying everything. Trust the process." Trust the process. That phrase always sounds so reasonable, until it's used to justify ignoring what we know is wrong. Still, I was no longer in a position to argue. I sat in my kitchen, half-dressed, staring at a screen full of risks I had once been responsible for resolving, now politely ignored. And that's when I noticed something else. At the bottom of the Helvetic file was a signature page. Under Compliance Review, it read, "Approved by Isolde Marin." Only, I had never signed it. I pulled the document's metadata. My name had been removed from the version history. The digital signature chain, cleaned. There was no record of my review, my login, my approval, yet. There it was. My name, still listed as the validator. I opened the system log archive. A week ago, someone had removed my metadata permissions. No flag, no notice. I wasn't even supposed to know it had happened. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being overwritten. Quietly, thoroughly, strategically. I contacted legal, asked, without accusation, whether I was still listed on the contract review path. Their reply came back flat. "We were informed that you're no longer required in the compliance loop for this transaction." No explanation, no CC. Just done. I sat there a long time after that, not angry, not even surprised anymore, just hollow. They had left my name on the outside to project credibility, but inside, they'd gutted every trace of my judgment, my control, my authority. The deal would close, and when questions came, because they always do, my name would be stamped at the bottom of a page I never approved. And the worst part? It would look legitimate. I closed the document. There's a particular kind of betrayal that doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It comes with quiet edits, access removals, deleted version histories. It comes when the system you built is used to erase you from itself. And I realized in that moment, this wasn't just about being replaced. It was about being rewritten, and they thought I wouldn't notice. I didn't slam the keyboard. I didn't call legal. I didn't send a frantic email with bullet points in bold fonts. I just stared at the screen and exhaled. They'd removed my name from the metadata, scrubbed the signature logs, pretended I'd never touched the Helvetic contract. And yet, somewhere in the official version, they still used my name to suggest compliance had been met. I wasn't erased. I was being impersonated. So I made a decision, not loud, not reactive, just clear. If they were rewriting the official record, I would start writing the real one. 2 years ago, I attended a governance summit in Geneva. Between breakout sessions and keynote speeches, I'd sat beside a man named Matthias Keller, a forensic auditor from Zurich, known for investigating regulatory fraud in multinational deals. He spoke like a clock, precise, mechanical, but sharp. Over coffee, he'd said something I never forgot. If a system is compromised, don't confront it, mirror it. And so I did. I reopened an LLC I'd set up years ago, one I used for freelance compliance consulting. It was still active, still clean. I updated the license, refreshed the digital certs, and built a small secure data bridge, one that mirrored every compliance file. Financial record and contract revision I still had access to inside Virelion. Every Friday at 4:43 p.m., it would generate an encrypted packet and send it to Matthias. He'd agreed, without question, to act as a blind third-party recipient. He wouldn't read unless prompted. He'd simply timestamp, log, and archive. Nothing I was doing was illegal. I wasn't stealing data. I wasn't breaching systems. I was making identical copies of files I had legal access to. I didn't manipulate them. I didn't alter a line. I just preserved them, untouched, unedited, uncorrupted. It wasn't for revenge. It was for the record. Because if this deal ever collapsed, and I had a gnawing feeling it might, someone would need to know what really happened. Not the polished version, the version beneath. The first week, Matthias replied with a one-line email. Data received, archive initiated, no anomalies flagged. The second and third weeks, the same. Then came the fourth. This time, his message was different. Subject, signature chain discrepancy, flagged for review Isolde. During routine archive tagging, we detected inconsistencies in the signature sequence on the Helvetic contract files. Timestamp hierarchy is irregular, and digital custody logs show gaps, suggesting post-approval modifications. Would you like us to widen the scope to include full signature integrity tracking? M. Keller, I stared at his words for a long time. So I wasn't imagining it. Someone had tampered with the contract's approval path after I'd been removed. Not just removing me, but inserting false approvals under my name. It made sense now, why my name still appeared on the PDF, even though I hadn't signed anything. They had altered the digital trail to match the optics they needed, to protect the illusion of due diligence. This wasn't sloppiness, it was design. I could have told him yes. Open the investigation, pull the chain, raise the alarms. But it wasn't time. Not yet. I typed back slowly. Not yet. Please flag and retain everything. I'll advise when review is required. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop, placed it on the table, and poured myself a glass of water. I stood at the window for a long while, watching the city lights flicker against the quiet sky. I didn't feel angry. I felt grounded. They thought they had silenced me by pushing me aside, erasing my access, deleting my involvement. But what they didn't understand is that compliance doesn't live in a signature or a PDF. It lives in the chain of truth behind every decision. And now that truth lived in Zurich. They had built their contract on unstable fronts, fake subsidiaries, and a manipulated audit trail. I had just built something far more dangerous, a mirror, and I was the only one holding the reflection. I hadn't opened the control panel in months. After setting up the reverse audit system, I thought that would be my final act. A silent archive. a backup copy of truth. But Keller's email about the forged signature trail had stirred something else. If they were rewriting the story, maybe they were also rewriting the tools. So I logged in. The interface was clean, minimal. No Verelion branding. Just the structure I had built a year and a half ago, during a moment no one else remembered. Back then, our internal IT infrastructure had suffered a security breach. Third-party contractors lost encrypted documents, and legal was in chaos. Verelion's leadership wanted to pause all international deal flows until they found a solution. But I knew delays would kill negotiations with Helvetique, so I took a risk. I deployed a separate, cloud-based platform under my LLC, intended only as a temporary bridge, a secure document exchange and contract coordination system, fully compliant, fully isolated. We told legal it was a short-term sandbox. No one followed up. Then Gavin took over. He never asked about infrastructure. He just wanted systems that worked and didn't slow him down. So we kept using it. Month after month. The Helvetic deal ran on a platform that was, legally, technically, and operationally, mine. I paid the monthly subscription from my own card. Not because I was hiding it, just because no one noticed or cared. Until now. On the dashboard, I clicked into the License tab. Expiration date, 2 days. A small orange warning. Auto renewal inactive. Owner action required. There it was. The contract platform for a $1.6 billion deal, quietly counting down to shutdown. I stared at the screen, strangely calm. No one at Verelion knew that if I didn't click Renew, the back-end coordination system would lock itself, not delete anything, just freeze all access, pause transactions, and suspend API syncing, like a vault door sliding shut. Only one user had renewal privileges. Me. I hadn't planned this. I didn't set a trap. I just never relinquished the keys. And that's when I saw the new alert. Unauthorized modifications detected. 3 instances this week. I opened the log. Tuesday, 2:20 p.m. Attempted overwrite of clause 14.7. Rejected. Thursday, 9:31 a.m. Attempt to insert alternate payment routing. Rejected. Friday, 4:56 p.m. Bulk metadata edit. Rejected. All 3 were blocked. All 3 had been routed through secondary user tokens without biometric validation. I had built that requirement into the original architecture. No one could edit the contract without triggering the integrity protocol. And now the system was talking back. Not with alarms, not with sirens, just a quiet record. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of irony sinking in. They fired me, erased me from metadata, stripped me from compliance trails. But they forgot one crucial thing. They were still running their flagship deal through my system, a system built for speed. Yes, but also for accountability. Every action time-stamped, every access key tracked, every silent warning logged. They thought they'd moved on. They never left. I stared at the Renew button, glowing orange. All I had to do was click nothing. In 48 hours, the platform would lock them out. But not yet, not today. Instead, I set a note on my calendar. No auto-renewal, no alarm. Just a simple reminder. Decision point, 48 hours. Because sometimes, power doesn't come from saying no. It comes from waiting to see if they realize who they still depend on. And when they don't, that's when the real silence begins. Because the cloud still has my name on it. Every system has a clock built into it. Most people don't hear it, but I do. And right now, it was ticking louder than ever. After reviewing the unauthorized access logs from the cloud server, I turned my attention to something I hadn't checked in weeks. The quarterly audit schedule from Zurich. It was still there, exactly as it had always been, Friday at 9:30 a.m. Swiss time. Locked in since the beginning of our engagement agreement. Immutable. Not even the CEO had the authority to delay it without formal request. And there had been none. 5 days from now. I sat back in my chair, staring at the audit calendar on my secondary monitor. Every data trail, every signature chain, every metadata timestamp was queued for review. If those files weren't clean, and they weren't, the system Matthias Keller managed in Zurich would catch it. No alarms, no scandals, just a quiet flag. But in the world of international compliance, a quiet flag was often more explosive than a press release. I checked the last upload from the mirrored system. All 3 tampering attempts had been logged, encrypted, and packaged for review. The audit would expose everything. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word, but as I double-checked the folder permissions, something else caught my eye. A document titled Helvetic Signing Tracker, Internal Use Only, had been uploaded to Verelian's restricted internal directory. It wasn't flagged for compliance, but I still had ghost-level access through a system I had helped build 2 years ago. I opened it. Inside was a timeline. Contract signing, moved up by 48 hours. New target, Tuesday, end of day. I scrolled down. Gavin's name was all over the document. It included notes about preemptive digital signing, legal compartmentalization, and expedited payment triggers. But the part that made my fingers go cold was this. Audit cycle begins Friday. Goal is to execute contract prior to data pull. So that's what he was doing. He wasn't just rushing to close a deal. He was trying to beat the audit. Because once the Zurich review began, any signature manipulation, metadata tampering, or unverified digital activity would be captured and stamped permanently into the external record. But if the contract was signed before that, he could point to a completed transaction and argue the rest was irrelevant. My name might still be on the approval field, and he'd say it had already been processed. Nothing left to examine. I closed the document slowly. It was smart. In a way, desperate, but strategic. Except for one problem. The system he was relying on to house the final contract, the cloud-based coordination platform, it was still mine. And it was still on a 48-hour countdown. The license renewal prompt was quietly waiting in the background. If I did nothing, the server would lock down early Thursday morning, which meant Gavin would miss his window by just a few hours. He had no idea. And I wasn't going to warn him. Instead, I opened a private notepad and began logging everything. Document titles, timestamp changes, calendar shifts, IP access patterns. I archived a copy of the Helvetic Signing Tracker and stored it outside the system. Then, I opened my calendar and created a single event, Zurich Audit Upload, Friday, 9:30 a.m. I set 2 reminders, one 12 hours before, the other 15 minutes prior. Then I sat back. 4 days to go. 4 days where I would do nothing but wait and listen to the hum of the system preparing itself. And while Gavin paced conference rooms and held early morning briefings, I simply watched the wires tighten, because I didn't need to fight him. He was sprinting toward his own collapse. They'd already broken procedure. They'd altered timestamps. They'd faked the chain of custody. And now, in their rush to seal the deal, they were missing the one thing I had never relinquished: the truth. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. This wasn't a victory, not yet. It was just gravity doing its job. They had spent months pretending I didn't exist. Now they were building an entire contract on a system they didn't even own. A house on borrowed land. A signature on a disappearing page. A deadline accelerating straight into the storm. And I was the clock, ticking softly in the background. Waiting. The hallway outside Gavin's office was painfully quiet. I could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights, the soft clatter of someone typing behind a frosted glass door, the dull whisper of the central air system. But what I heard most clearly was the silence of finality. I was called back at 5:15 p.m. The same hour I had first asked for a raise weeks ago. Full circle, only now. I wasn't walking in with data and logic. I was walking in with nothing left to defend. Gavin didn't look up when I entered. He was scrolling on his phone, legs crossed, smile already forming like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "You should have seen this coming," he said. Voice light, almost casual. "Your time here is over." I said nothing. My hands stayed clasped in front of me. "I assume you've arranged a transition?" I asked calmly. He let out a short, amused breath. "There's no need. We're good. You're done. Effective now." He finally looked at me, and for the first time. There was no pretense, no corporate charm, just the look of someone who had wanted me gone from the start and had finally made it real. "I'd prefer to resign," I said softly, with dignity. Gavin shook his head as if I'd asked for an award. "Why drag it out? We've already revoked your system access. Just stop by HR for your exit packet." He slid a white envelope across the desk. No words on the outside, no company letterhead, just weightless paper hiding weighty disrespect. I didn't reach for it. There was no one from HR in the room, no colleague present to witness the moment, no handshake, no thank you, no sense of closure. 12 years erased with a sealed envelope. And then came the final twist of the knife. The door opened behind me. I turned. Talia Rowe stepped in, bright-eyed, notebook in hand, dressed for the part. She paused when she saw me, her confidence faltering for just a moment. Around her neck hung a familiar silver fan-shaped pendant, the birthday gift I'd given her last summer, when she was still my intern, back when I'd believed she might one day carry the legacy of thoughtful, ethical work. "Talia will be leading the global coordination efforts moving forward," Gavin said, as if the words didn't land like bricks. Fresh eyes, fresh pace. Talia couldn't look at me. She lowered her head, whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "It's fine," I said, cutting her off gently. "It's not your fault." She was young, eager, just trying to survive in a system that rewarded obedience over depth. I didn't blame her, not really. I turned back to Gavin. He offered one last smirk. "Don't forget to drop off your badge." I nodded once and walked out. No tears, no collapse, just a quiet, restrained silence that filled the hallway with more meaning than anything he'd said. The eyes of the office followed me, some peering over monitors, others pretending not to see. A few looked away too quickly. One or two gave that tight, sympathetic smile that never makes it to the eyes. No one stood, no one said goodbye. I reached my desk, cleared it without emotion. One mug, one folder, one framed photo I hadn't looked at in months. When I stepped into the elevator, I could feel the tension slide off me like a coat too heavy for spring. And yet, beneath it was something colder, sharper, not grief, not even anger. Clarity. They had cut me out, replaced me, pretended I had never mattered. But what Gavin didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that their $1.6 billion deal was still running on a cloud platform I owned, protected by a license only I could renew. And it was counting down. As the elevator doors slid shut, I reached into my pocket and ran my fingers over the small metal USB I carried like a lifeline. Inside it was the final key. The real key. Gavin had smiled at 5:15 p.m., but he'd never once asked where the real signature lived. The elevator doors shut behind me like the final click of a vault. I didn't look back. The chaos Gavin had unleashed upstairs would bloom soon enough, but not before I slipped away, unbothered, untouched. The parking garage hummed faintly, lights flickering overhead like a warning I didn't need. I walked past rows of polished cars until I reached mine, a gray SUV tucked into the corner, old but faithful. I popped the trunk. There it was, a silver laptop inside a fireproof lockbox, wrapped in foam and silence. I pressed the button. The screen came to life without sound. Just a soft glow that lit my face. No logo. No OS splash screen, just code. My code. First, I activated the secured router tucked beneath the mat. Independent. Untraceable. Buried beneath every IT protocol Gavin believed he controlled. Then, I connected to my personal cloud infrastructure. The interface bloomed in muted blue and white. Orion Archive, LLC, the server that powered the $1.6 billion contract infrastructure, registered under my name, built with my hands, and secured with keys known only to me. The dashboard flickered. 3 unauthorized modification attempts detected this week. Source, HQ node. Authentication, failed. License validity, 10 minutes and 43 seconds remaining. I clicked deeper. Their tampering had grown desperate. Someone, likely Gavin himself, had tried to rewrite access credentials in the back end, bypassing biometric protocol 3 times, all logged, all blocked. Then I opened a second window and inserted the brass USB key around my neck, a failsafe I hadn't used in over a year. Zurich Audit System. It greeted me with a low chime. I logged in using a rotating access token and scrolled through the recent snapshots. Every Thursday at 5 p.m., my system had been auto-forwarding financial ledgers, access logs, and metadata trails to Zurich. Signed, time-stamped, untouched. But tonight, there was something new. A red alert pulsed at the top of the interface. Signature discrepancy detected. Metadata conflict on file. Helvetique Core 2142. Sal. Alert auto-sent at 5:21 p.m. Recipient. Compliance at helvetiquegroup.ch. My lips barely curved. Zurich had noticed. They'd sent the alert before I even opened the laptop. I wasn't just reacting. I was ahead. I expanded the file tree. At the bottom, a validation script blinked. Digital signature mismatch. Authority trace, CHIU, revoked. The signature on the newest version of the Helvetique contract didn't match my original. Notarized key. Because it wasn't mine. Because I hadn't signed it. Because they tried to cut me out. Now, the very system Gavin thought he could manipulate had sent the red flag to Helvetique's legal department. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed a single command. Tracelog.execute integrity. Verification lines of code began scrolling. In 5 minutes, Zurich would receive a full comparison report between the original contracts I built and the altered versions the company had tried to push through, highlighted in crimson where tampering had occurred. They wouldn't be able to deny it. Not to the audit board, not to Helvetique, not even to the SEC, once Zurich completed the secondary filing chain. I didn't feel angry anymore, just still. I thought about the early mornings I spent reviewing clause hierarchies, the nights I gave up sleep to write dual contingency frameworks, just in case things like this happened. The coffee-stained notebooks from 5 years ago where I'd sketched out what a reverse chain of trust might look like. They called it overkill. It was never overkill. It was insurance. I toggled back to the cloud server's mainframe. The license timer read, 6 minutes and 12 seconds remaining. Soon. The contract shell system would expire unless manually renewed, and I was the only one with access to the biometric key required for renewal. I could hear muffled footsteps echoing above me. Somewhere in the building, Gavin was realizing that nothing had saved, that the system had reverted to pre-launch architecture, that the countdown wasn't metaphorical. He would come looking for answers, but I wasn't in the mood to offer any. I closed the laptop gently and placed it back in the foam-lined case. 5:38 p.m. On the final screen, a confirmation flashed. Alert delivered. License lock confirmed. Primary key holder. Isolde Marin. I shut the trunk. Justice doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it comes in a whisper, and a blinking red light no one else saw coming. I sat in the driver's seat. the leather cooling beneath me as dusk fell across the empty parking lot. My fingers hovered over the keyboard of the old ThinkPad cradled in my lap. The screen lit my face with a quiet glow as I watched the timer tick down. License status: active. 2 minutes and 43 seconds remaining. I whispered aloud, though no one could hear. "You don't get to keep what you stole." A soft click. The command window opened. "Revoke access to primary contract shell?" I didn't blink. "Yes." The confirmation prompt appeared in less than a second, and I entered the biometric key. My pulse barely fluttered as the screen changed. Access revoked for Virelion.global.op's contract node, inactive. In the silence that followed, I felt my chest rise without resistance for the first time in months. Not victory, just air. The cloud server, built under my name, under my license, under my own digital identity, began sending silent confirmations, first to Zurich, then to Helvetic's legal compliance inbox, then to my LLC's cold storage archive. Within 60 seconds, I knew the message had been delivered. At 5:59 p.m., a red flag was raised in Helvetic's internal network. Digital contract node invalidated, certificate chain broken, action required. At that same moment, across the city in Virelion's marble-wrapped C-suite, Gavin's screen flashed with a system error. The deal he thought he had locked in, $1.6 billion across 5 international platforms, was now nothing more than a ghost file. A shell without signature, a transaction that never actually existed. He tried to re-authenticate. He failed. The server denied his credentials. He attempted manual override, but when he tried to re-sign the metadata packet, another message appeared. Signature mismatch. Original signer not verified. Certificate invalid. The signature Gavin had used, granted by a rushed IT patch months ago, was not anchored in the root certification protocol I authored. Zurich had it on file. The chain was immutable. Back in my car, the final confirmation arrived. Contract shell, 100% ownership relinquished by Virelion. Status, null. It was over. I closed the lid slowly, gently. No flourish, no dramatic music in the background, just the soft snap of resolution. I leaned back against the seat, closed my eyes, and listened to the silence. Not the kind that suffocates, the kind that frees. 12 years of building systems, restoring the firm during collapse, pouring my own savings into servers to keep the company alive. Gone. Not because I failed, but because I dared to ask for what I was worth. He told me I was too old to evolve. He never imagined I was 10 steps ahead. The audit logs from Zurich would go public by morning. The delay Gavin had engineered, adjusting the internal deadline by 5 days, had been flagged and backdated. Tampering. The digital receipt of revocation would stand as evidence that the contract was never legally activated. Without my final authentication, no deal held water, not in Europe, not in the US, not in Singapore. They had tried to remove my name from the metadata, but they forgot one thing. The system only runs when it recognizes the architect, and I never taught it to recognize fraud. As I sat still in the growing dark, a soft vibration buzzed through my coat pocket. My phone lit up. From caden.lock@helveticgroup.ch. Subject: Proposal for Continued Architecture Consultation, Helvetic Global Expansion. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't reply. Not yet. I stared at the stars beginning to scatter above the city. I had spent years building safety nets for everyone else. Now, finally, I'd built one for myself, and I'd just proved it could hold. The alert hit at 5:38 p.m., precisely 1 minute after I hit revoke. The contract interface on Virelion's internal system went dark, line by line, clause by clause, until all access permissions vanished completely. Then came the ripple. Within seconds, Helvetic's legal compliance team flagged the anomaly, and 5 seconds later, The boardroom erupted. I wasn't in the building anymore. I was sitting quietly in my car, the laptop still glowing beside me. But I could picture it all, the way Gavin would lurch forward in his chair, his neck tightening as he scanned the now blank contract registry. The Helvetic director would glance up, frowning, confused, and someone, probably Margot from legal, would try refreshing the platform, not yet realizing that what just happened wasn't a glitch. It was final. They'd called this deal unbreakable. They spent months convincing investors of its inevitability. But there was one clause they didn't understand. Because I never filed it publicly, only one person had the authority to approve, maintain, and extend the core compliance license embedded in the metadata system. That person was me. A soft ping hit my inbox. Urgent. System access failure at 5:38 p.m. Please advise. They didn't know I wasn't one of them anymore. Not officially. Not legally. Not contractually. I watched as messages stacked up. 5:39 p.m. Gavin. Who revoked the primary signature? 5:40 p.m. Legal ops. No fallback access. Emergency restore failed. The system had no backup signature that could override mine. Gavin tried. He used his digital token, but the Zurich auditors had already received the mirrored ledger from my side, showing the irregularities, the mismatched authorizations, the improperly modified clauses. Then came the market impact. At 5:41 p.m., Helvetic's press team released a vague statement about contractual delays due to procedural inconsistencies. Investors weren't stupid. Within minutes, the stock price dipped 1.7%, then 3.4%. Then it tanked. I leaned back in my seat, the engine still running. As the full-scale collapse unfolded like a domino line, someone had tried to glue upright with pride alone. 5:43 p.m. Zurich compliance. Violation of clause 7.2.9. Invalid signature detected. Deal suspended pending forensic review. That was the moment the phones in the boardroom likely started ringing in tandem. And Gavin? He was probably staring at the wall, silently calculating how many meetings he'd skipped, how many systems he'd never understood, how many people, like me, he'd dismissed. Another ping, this one different. A private message from an unknown number. I assume you kept the original contract version. I'd like to talk. JT Jonathan Trent. Board member, silent investor. The man Gavin thought he'd charmed into compliance. He hadn't. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed 2 words. Still intact. By 5:46 p.m., internal emails leaked. One showed that Gavin had instructed the metadata team to remove my signature from the registry 2 weeks earlier, without legal consent. Another revealed that someone on the compliance team flagged the action, but Gavin overrode it manually. It didn't matter that they tried to bury it. I had backups, encrypted, time-stamped, watermarked. This wasn't revenge. This was truth finding its way through layers of arrogance and denial. And when truth moves that fast, it doesn't knock, it crashes. 5:51 p.m. Emergency meeting called Full Audit Required. All contract activity frozen until further notice. My phone buzzed again. A second message from JT. They won't survive this, but you might. Let's talk, somewhere off record. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply watched the sunset paint the sky behind the windshield. The same sky I used to see from my corner office before they erased my name from the door. They thought I'd disappear after they fired me, but I had never left. Not really. I was the one who built the system. And tonight, I was the one who took it down. The email arrived at 5:54 p.m. Subject line, Formal Recognition and Advisory Invitation, Helvetic Group. I clicked it without breathing. Inside, a single paragraph. Polite, precise, impeccably timed. Ms. Marin, in light of recent findings and your decisive intervention, Helvetique Group formally invites you to join our Global Integrity Board as Senior Independent Advisor. Effective immediately, we extend our gratitude for protecting the integrity of this $1.6 billion agreement. There was no flattery, no hollow praise, just fact. And for the first time in years, that was enough. I sat back. The air felt different. Not lighter, more defined, sharper, like the static just before a storm breaks. Outside the conference room window, chaos still brewed inside Verelion. Compliance teams panicked. Legal advisors swarmed Gavin's office. Phones rang in short, desperate bursts. But I stayed in my seat, untouched, calm. I'd fought my battle in silence. And now came the quiet after. Another notification pinged in. This time, a digital folder, granted access from Helvetique's internal archive. I opened it, unsure of what I was expecting: contract documents, audit confirmations, server logs. But there it was, a PDF. One page. Marin Compliance Framework, designed by Isolde Marin. My name, bold, centered, not a footnote, not metadata. The framework I created, rebuilt, repurposed, and renamed in my honor. For years, I'd given them quiet brilliance, invisible contributions, the kinds of systems that don't show up in quarterly updates but hold entire corporations together. I never asked for credit, never demanded visibility. But this was more than visibility. This was vindication. I downloaded the file, saved a copy, then two more, one on a flash drive, one printed. The timestamp? 5:59 p.m., 3 minutes before close of business, 3 minutes before my chapter with Verelion officially ended. And then came the last surprise. One final email. No subject line. Just a sender. gavin.cade@verelionglobal.com. I hovered over it for a second, then opened. Effective immediately, I resign from my position as Chief Operations Officer. All actions moving forward will be managed by interim COO designation. I accept full accountability for internal oversights during the Helvetique transaction process. There's only one thing left to say: I underestimated the wrong woman. Gavin Cade. I stared at the line, not smug, not angry, just still. There was a time I might have saved that email, shared it, used it as a trophy. But now I simply closed it. Because I didn't need it. I had my name, my system, my voice, finally heard. Not just within the walls of a company, but across the global firms that once saw me as background. And above all, I had peace. I packed up the last of my things. Nothing dramatic. Just a pen. A notebook. The plant I kept alive through 3 CFOs. As I stood, I looked once more at the wall where my employee badge used to hang. A blank space now. But it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a beginning. When I stepped out into the hallway, the evening air met me like an old friend. Cool, grounded, familiar. I didn't walk out as someone fired. I walked out as someone who walked away, with dignity, with justice, with the truth behind me and the future finally open in front of me. No, I didn't ask for a raise at 5:15 p.m. I reclaimed something far more powerful at 6 o'clock p.m. Myself. I didn't ask for a raise. I reclaimed my dignity. This story isn't just about numbers, contracts, or a single click on revoke. It's a reminder that we don't always need to shout to be heard, sometimes. Standing still with quiet conviction is more powerful than any argument. If you've ever felt overlooked, silenced, or underestimated, I hope this story gave you a spark of something deeper. Courage. Maybe. Or a sense that you're not alone. If something in this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your own journey. A simple like, share, or hitting that subscribe button helps this channel grow and brings these stories to the people who need them most. Because sometimes, one story at the right moment can remind someone of their worth.